Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
We are, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
State may call their next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Dr. Muhammad Ali.
Doctor, can you raise your right hand for me, please? Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please have a seat. You may proceed, Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself to the jury and then spell your name for the record.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Muhammad Ali, and it's Mohamad, and last name is Ali, A-L-I. I'm a pediatrician.
Okay. And where are you currently working as a pediatrician?
I work for CSC of Pike County up in Waverly.
Okay. How long have you been a pediatrician?
Actually, 20 years now.
20 years. If you would, explain to the members of the jury your educational background.
Yeah, so I did my medical school from Peshawar University in Pakistan, and then I did my pediatric residency, University of Oklahoma, Tulsa.
Okay. And what are your current licensures or board certifications?
Yeah, I'm a board certified pediatrician, and I'm licensed in the state of Ohio.
Okay. And in your practice in Waverly, do you treat pediatric patients on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, I do.
Okay. What is considered a pediatric patient?
So pediatric, from the time they're born till they almost graduate from high school. It depends on what definition you look at. If you look at the American Academy of Pediatrics, it's 21.
Okay. So birth to 21?
Yes.
Okay. And you've been seeing children birth to 21 for 20 years?
20 years, yes.
Okay. At this time, Your Honor, I'd ask that he be designated an expert in pediatric care.
Does either defendant wish to question the doctor to the extent of his qualifications as pediatrics?
I would waive such questioning. We would stipulate his expertise as a pediatrician based on his years of practice and his education.
We'll waive and stipulate also.
Hence, as waived and stipulated, Dr. Ali is deemed an expert in the field of pediatrics. It means, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he is allowed to give opinion testimony in his field.
May I continue, Your Honor?
Continue.
Thank you. Doctor, in the normal course of your business there at Valley View, do you maintain patient records?
Yes, we do.
Okay. For each patient?
For each patient.
And each visit?
Each visit.
Okay. Let me hand you what's previously been marked as State's Exhibit 19 and ask you if you recognize these documents. The record would reflect that you're showing to the defense counsel. Do you recognize those records?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And how do you recognize them?
This is when I'd seen the infant in my office. I'd seen him there for a couple of times, different times, and this is one of the notes.
Okay. And when you say the infant, are you referring to infant Dylan Groves?
Yes.
Okay. Let me direct your attention to that time frame. It looks like you would have started seeing baby Dylan at the hospital. Is that right?
Yes, I did. So the first time I'd seen him was at the hospital after he was born. And then once he went home, I'd seen him a couple of times at my office.
Okay. Were there any concerns for the baby at the time you saw him at the hospital?
Yes,
Medical concerns?
Yes. So we had to keep the baby a little longer than usual. Normally we keep the baby for a couple of days, but Dylan had to stay there almost a week because he was experiencing some withdrawal symptoms.
When you say withdrawal symptoms, what do you mean?
What that means is sometimes babies, when the mom is pregnant, it depends on what medications they're taking or what drugs they're exposed to, and the baby gets exposed to the same. And then after the birth, they can experience withdrawal symptoms.
Okay. Would you explain to the members of the jury what types of symptoms you look for?
So typically we look for a lot of sneezing, sometimes excessive diarrhea, tremors. The major symptom is tremors, shakiness. and then excessive irritability, lack of appetite. So there's a long list of symptoms.
Okay. Would a baby who's withdrawing from drugs experience pain?
That is hard to say, but if you've treated everything else, all the other symptoms, and the baby is still irritable excessively, then that could be one possibility.
Okay. And you said you saw baby Dylan after his release from the hospital as well, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Would that have been January 16th, his first visit with you?
Correct.
Okay. If you would, explain to the members of the jury what the reason for his appointment was.
So basically, once they go home, the babies, normally we see them in a couple of days. That's a routine. But especially in a case like this, we want to make sure we see them because we want to make sure that after they've been treated for their withdrawal symptoms, they're doing better and they're not reverting back to the symptoms. So with him, that was the major reason.
And do you call these visits well child checks or well newborn checks?
Yes, well newborn check.
Okay.
Yes.
If you would generally describe for the jury what that involves, a well newborn check.
So at this stage, when we see a newborn, what it entails is we want to make sure they're getting enough nutrition, we keep track of their weight, and then, obviously their output as far as urine, and how they're in general how they're doing, their
Okay.
well-being.
Okay. Do you recall or could you refer to your records and tell the jury who accompanied the baby to his first appointment?
Yeah. So the first time I'd seen the baby was a foster parent.
Okay. And were there any concerns voiced by the foster parent in regards to baby Dylan's health?
Objection, that's a hearsay.
Your Honor, these are medical diagnoses.
Can counsel approach for a moment? And restate the question, please.
Doctor, in your well visit with baby Dylan and the foster mother on January 16th, did she express any concerns to you regarding his medical health?
Yeah, a couple of things. She had mentioned that he had been sneezing excessively and that had seen a few tremors.
Okay. Before we go any further, is it normal for a baby to sneeze?
Yes, it's normal for a baby to sneeze, but it's excessive sneezing, especially with such a background and a history, then it means a little different.
Okay, and then also with the tremors?
With the tremors, yes.
Okay.
Although tremors are, very unusual in a healthy newborn. So at any point, if there are tremors, then we get concerned.
Okay. If you would explain to the members of the jury, if you remember or by referring to the medical records, what baby Dylan's height and weight was at that visit on January 16th.
Yes, I can. So yeah, he was 19 inches tall and weighed 5 pounds and 5.5 ounces.
Okay. If that were a little less than what he weighed at birth, would that be abnormal?
His birth weight was 5 pounds and 10 ounces. No, that's not unusual. So basically, by the time infants are 2 weeks old, if they weigh as much as the birth weight, then it's fine. They can lose up to 5 to 10% the first week or 10 days.
Okay, why is that?
A lot of times it's the retained fluid that they have in their body when they're inside mom, so they lose a lot of that fluid, and that's an important factor.
Okay, and if you would explain to the members of the jury your general examination of baby Dylan, what that included and what you found.
So yeah, the general exam, we do a basically head-to-toe exam. We check all the system, head and neck, chest, heart, abdomen, skin, neurology, all the different symptoms. And basically that day, his exam, there was nothing unusual about his exam when I seen him in the office at the time I'd seen him.
Okay.
at that specific time.
No bruising to the baby?
I did not see any bruising, no.
Okay. Were you made aware of any injuries as a result of the actual delivery?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. And it looks like you examined extremities and chest and back, abdomen, nothing abnormal there either?
No, nothing abnormal.
Okay. And so would it be fair to say that other than the withdrawal symptoms, he was doing well?
He was doing well, yes.
Okay. And it looks like, let me direct your attention to January 23rd, 2019. Did you have an occasion to see baby Dylan again in your office?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And again, who was present for this appointment with the baby?
A foster parent.
Okay. And the foster parent that presented the baby for the appointment, did she express any concerns in regards to his health?
Let me look at my notes here. The foster parent had mentioned that, the baby had been excessively sweating, but did not report anything else like fever, rash, any illnesses, nothing else.
Okay. Would the excessive sweating be related to withdrawal symptoms, or is that something unrelated?
That's something unrelated.
Okay. And if you would again tell the members of the jury what his height and weight was at that appointment.
At that appointment, his height was 19.5 inches and weight was almost 6 pounds.
Okay, so he's picking weight back up.
Yes.
All right. And so would it be a fair statement to say at that appointment the baby was doing well?
Yes.
Okay. Was there ever any concern about an abnormal newborn screen for baby Dylan?
Yes, so normally we do a newborn screening on all the babies. It's required by the state of Ohio. And at one point I was notified about an abnormal screening.
Okay, and was
this
that,
baby.
I'm sorry.
But there was a little miscommunication because then after this visit, I'd never seen the baby. They transferred care to Christ Care Pediatrics. And then they had notified us about the abnormal screening, and we had thought that we had repeated. Normally when we get an abnormal screen, the routine is we repeat it. And most of the times the repeat ones come back normal. So for some reason we thought we had repeated the screening, but we had actually not. There was a miscommunication.
Okay, and was that the 17-hydroxyprogesterone?
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
You were saying that perfect.
Okay, would you explain to the jury what that is?
That is a product, so on top of the kidneys we have a small gland, it's called the adrenal gland. It makes that chemical. And it regulates your blood pressure, your blood volume, basically. It's a very critical chemical as far as especially your blood pressure regulation.
Okay, and so if the baby in fact had an abnormal 17-hydroxyprogesterone, if that was actually an issue for the baby, it would cause blood pressure issues, did you say?
It will cause excessive hypertension, and it depends on, how, because when you see the abnormalities in that gland, the adrenal gland, it can be to the point where the baby's not even thriving, the baby's not gaining weight, or the baby refuses to eat, So those are some of the symptoms. Routinely, we don't check blood pressures on babies when they come to the office, unless there's a suspicion for something.
Okay.
So that's why you don't see the blood pressure and the vital signs.
And was your office ever notified about whether or not a follow-up was done?
We just had we had some communication from Christ Care Pediatrics, and that's the last we heard about the screening.
Okay, so you're not aware of whether or not they eliminated that possibility?
I'm not aware.
Okay. If he had an issue with that, would that result in fractures to his bones?
No.
Would that result in bruising to his body?
No.
Would that result in swelling to his head?
No.
Okay, so
Absolutely
it's not an issue like that?
No.
Okay. Your Honor, I have nothing further at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Ms. Scott, you may cross-examine the witness.
Dr. Ali, when you had the exam with baby Dylan at the hospital, was that at SOMC Medical?
Correct.
Southern High Medical Center?
Yes.
And was that at the same time that that was his initial birth before he was originally discharged? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Were the parents present for your initial examination of baby Dylan?
The best that I can recall, I think when I did my initial exam, because the routine is when we do initial exam, we go talk to the parents. So from what I can recall, I think I remember talking to the mother just to, because routinely we discuss the newborn exam and then if they have any concerns, questions, or they would like to discuss anything.
Okay. But your only recollection at this time, and I know it's been almost a year ago, your only recollection is you may have had a conversation with the mom?
I may have.
Okay. You don't recall having a conversation or dad being present for that conversation?
No, I do not recall that.
But it doesn't mean he was not present?
Correct.
You just don't have any independent recollection?
That's correct.
And then the 2 visits that you had in your office, those were, the child was accompanied by his foster parent?
That's correct.
And neither parent was present during those office visits?
That is correct.
Okay, is that unusual that just a foster parent brings in a child when a child is in foster care versus a foster parent and or the parent?
So that's a good question. A lot of times when we see these babies that are, because of the social situation, they get transferred to foster parents or relatives. A lot of times when they come see me in the office, just the foster parent is there. Sometimes, you can have the relatives there, and then in cases I've seen the parents there too.
Okay, but it's more typical that the foster parent would
Usually
be
it's
there
the
along
foster
with the
parent.
child?
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you very much. Appreciate it, Dr. Ali.
No problem.
Any further questions of this guy?
No further questions, thank you.
Hutchinson, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Any other questions for this witness?
Not on my behalf, Your Honor. Thank you.
Is he excused?
Excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, thank you very much. You're free to go. Sorry, who's your next witness?
Dr. Gregory Hudson.
Dr. Hudson. Sir, can you raise your right hand for me, please? You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. I do. Sir, please have a seat. Ms. Hutchinson, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name for our record.
Okay. I'm Greg Hudson. I am a pediatrician. My last name is spelled Hudson.
And Dr. Hudson, where are you employed as a pediatrician?
At Christ Care Pediatrics in South Shore, Kentucky.
Okay. And how long have you been a pediatrician?
30 years.
Okay. If you would explain to the members of the jury what your educational background is.
Yes, I went to college at Moro State University and had a big degree in biology and a minor in chemistry. Then went to the University of Louisville School of Medicine, followed by a pediatric residency at Louisville affiliated hospitals and Kosar Children's Hospital, which is now Norton's Children's Hospital in Louisville, Kentucky.
And what licensures or board certifications do you hold?
I am board certified in pediatrics and have a license to practice medicine both in the state of Ohio and the state of Kentucky.
Okay. Let me hand you what's going to be marked as State's Exhibit 20. The record would reflect that I'm showing that to the defense counsel. Do you recognize the document that I've just handed you?
Yes,
Okay, and what is that?
that is my curriculum vitae.
Okay, and is that a true and accurate representation of your educational background, your experience, your licenses?
It is.
Okay. For the record, doctor, what is considered a pediatric patient?
Pediatric patient is a patient anywhere from birth up until 18 years or sometimes even through college age as far as the care that we give at our office.
Okay, and so you've been treating children from birth to
Through college age. some of
college
them,
age for 30 years?
30 years.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that the court designate him as an expert in pediatric care.
State has offered Dr. Hudson as an expert in the field of pediatric care. Does either defense counsel wish to question him as to his extent of his qualifications.
Your Honor, we would waive such questioning. We would stipulate to his designation as an expert in pediatric care.
We'll waive the stipulated also.
Given the stipulation, court will find Dr. Hudson is an expert in the field of pediatric care, which means, once again, for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he is allowed to give expert opinions in his field of practice. You may continue, Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Doctor, before we move on to why we're here today, in your course of business over there at Christ Care, do you maintain patient records?
Yes.
Okay, and are those maintained on every patient for every visit?
Yes.
Okay. Let me hand you what's going to be marked as State's Exhibit 21 for identification. Doctor, if you would take a look through State's Exhibit 21 and tell me if you recognize this body.
Yes, I do recognize this.
Okay. And what patient records do you have there that you recognize?
Patient records of Dylan Groves.
Okay. And is he given a patient number or some type of identification for the record? More than his name, or do you just chart them by name?
I go by the name. I mean, I think we do have a number that we assign. But
Okay. All right. Would you say that's a true and accurate representation of the records provided by your office to our office?
Yes.
Okay. Let me direct your attention to February 2019. Did you have an opportunity to treat baby Dylan Groves as a pediatric patient?
On February, yes, in February, yes.
Okay. What was the first date that you would have seen baby Dylan? Would that have been February 21st?
February the 7th.
February the 7th. If you would explain to the members of the jury how you became involved in baby Dylan's care.
Pardon me, I'm sorry?
If you would explain to the jury how you became involved in his care on February 7th.
Okay. Of course, the parents had scheduled an appointment. We had called, I do believe, because of an abnormal newborn screening, that all infants get a blood test done shortly after the time of birth to screen for certain metabolic or endocrine abnormalities, things like cystic fibrosis or congenital adrenal hyperplasia, things like this. And there's a series of panel of tests, and one of his tests came back abnormal, and so we contacted them because I think they had probably listed us as being the pediatricians in the hospital, so we contacted them about coming in for an appointment, I think is what happened.
Okay. What was the reason? You said that you think that he came in because of some contact your office had with him, that you had been listed as the pediatrician at the time?
Yes, whenever a baby is born, the parents are asked who they want the pediatrician to be or who they want the physician to be to take care of the baby, and that is recorded in the state registry, I guess. And so whenever the results of the newborn screening comes back, they make sure they send it to the address that's associated with that physician.
Okay. And so when you saw the baby on February 7th, would you explain to the members of the jury what took place during his appointment, what your exam involved and what you found?
Yes, he came in with both his mother and father, and there's nothing really out of the ordinary as far as exam. What they do, they come in and get a set of vital signs, get the weight, and then their nurse asks some questions about how they're feeding and if they have any concerns or problems, and then they're placed in a room. And I come in, I talk to them, ask them kind of similar questions and make sure everything's going okay, and do a physical exam, just ask about feeding and that sort of thing, and dirty diapers and wet diapers and how they're sleeping. There was the only thing that was out of the ordinary that I recall from this visit was that he had this abnormal screening test, and so I talked to them about that and asked them to go over to Southern Ohio Medical Center to have some lab work done to make sure that even though the test had come back with an elevated level for a state lab, that he was in fact normal. And so that was it. We had prayer, and then they left and went apparently to the hospital and had the lab work done.
Okay. Did they report, the parents report, whether baby Dylan was bottle or breastfed?
Yes, they would have. It would be here in the note. I don't recall. I think bottle fed, but I can look and see.
Okay.
Formula fed, Gerber soup.
Okay, and if you would tell the members of the jury what his height and weight was at that time.
Okay. His weight was 7 pounds and 2 ounces, and his length was 19.5 inches.
Okay. And then you said you do a general examination. Does that mean you do, part of that is a musculoskeletal examination?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you do when you do that part of the examination, if you would explain that to the jury?
Okay. So, we start with just looking generally at the baby's skin, make sure the color's normal, there's not too much jaundice, that they're not, that they're pink, they're not cyanotic. Then, you go from the head down, make sure that there's nothing abnormal about the head, ears, eyes, throat. Make sure the baby is moving the arms well and has something called a Moro Reflex, so that you can kind of pull up on the little baby's hands and just gently kind of let them go and startle, make sure they have symmetric movement of the arms, check the legs, make sure that the tone is good in the legs, the muscles are good. We check the hips by we call abducting the hips. We hold the knees flexed and then go out with the hips and make sure that the hips are not dislocatable. And then just kind of see how the baby's moving. So that's the general musculoskeletal exam that we do.
Okay, and everything appeared to be normal from that visit?
It did.
Okay. Is it your policy in your office to schedule the next appointment before they leave? Would you schedule in advance?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And so when was the next time they were supposed to return?
Let me see. We asked to follow up at the 2 months and 6 to 8 weeks. And let's see. So I'm not sure, I don't see a date on this that actually.
Let me refer you, I believe, towards the front of your chart.
Okay, that's good.
You provided a document to our office that's labeled future appointments.
Okay.
I think there's 2 of them there.
Yes.
Okay, and so do you see one that looks like the one that I have?
Yes, says March 21st, February 7th and March 21st.
If you'll go to the next page.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay.
And then what is the earliest date there?
February the 21st.
Okay. And does that, I'm sorry, the sheet you're holding there match the sheet I'm holding?
It does.
Okay. And from your records, doctor, did they appear on February 21st with baby Dylan?
They did.
Okay. If you'll refer to that part of the chart. Again, what's the purpose of that visit?
Well, I think we wanted them to come back a little bit sooner because of the, usually they come back at 2 months. So this was a little earlier than 2 months. It's about almost 6 weeks. But one of the concerns, I guess, of course, was the abnormal newborn screen. Again, when we sent him to the lab, they did part of the lab work that we ordered, but there was an error made at the hospital, somewhere in the lab or registration, I'm not sure where, and they didn't do the second part of the tests that we had ordered. So we had the electrolytes that came back that were normal. That's the sodium and potassium in the blood, which were normal and very reassuring that he did not have the condition that the newborn screen indicated that he might have. But there was another test that I was looking for that was not done. That was a repeat of the newborn screen, and so they didn't do that.
Let me ask you, are these follow-up screenings that you're requesting in regards to the abnormal screening that showed that he may have abnormal or elevated levels of 17-hydroxyprogesterone?
Yes.
Okay. At some point, was that eliminated?
It was eliminated because you have to understand that I was not the physician that took care of the child in the hospital at Southern Ohio Medical Center. So they came to me subsequent to that. And I didn't realize that they had done a 17-hydroxyprogesterone at the hospital before he ever left. So with his normal serum electrolytes that were done on the 7th of February, coupled with the normal 17-hydroxyprogesterone level that was done while he was in the hospital, that pretty much eliminates the risk for him having that condition, 21-hydroxylase deficiency or congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So he did not have that, but I didn't realize that, so that was why I didn't realize he had that other test done, so it was one of the reasons I kept trying
You kept asking the parents to take him.
to do that.
Did they take him to your knowledge?
The second time, they took him the first time, but I don't know. We never were able to get the repeat newborn screening done. They didn't go back,
Okay.
is my understanding.
We'll come back to that in just a second. So let me direct your attention back to this February 21st office visit. Who presented there at the office with the baby?
I believe it was mom and dad.
Okay. And again, if you would, tell the members of the jury what his height and weight was at that visit.
Yes, his weight was, well, it was 17 pounds, 7 pounds, 15 ounces, although it says 7 pounds, 16 ounces. I don't know how that happened. But it was 7 pounds, 15 ounces when I went back and looked. But, and his length was 20.3 inches.
Okay. And if we reflect back to the future appointment sheet that we just looked at, and the one before that, what were the next scheduled appointments for baby Dylan?
So March the 7th, I'm sorry, and which would have been 2 weeks after this one, and then again on May the 2nd.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that March the 7th was probably because you had asked him to go again to get more testing?
I think that was part of it. Part of it was too that his weight percentile was on the lower end of normal, and so I wanted to make sure that he continued to gain at a normal rate.
So he was gaining, but not as much as you'd like?
Not quite as much as I would like.
Okay.
But he started out with a low birth weight, so it was okay. I just want to make sure it continued to be okay.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, you did not ever see baby Dylan again after that, is that right?
I did not.
Okay. During that February 21st exam, do you again perform that musculoskeletal examination that you demonstrated here for the jury about moving all the body parts and feeling him all over?
Yes.
Okay. No indication that he was injured at that time?
No.
Okay. And it looks like from the records you provided, your staff was attempting to contact the parents but not getting a response.
Yes, I don't think we ever made contact. I think by phone. I think we sent a letter that we did not hear back from.
Okay. I could have this one on. Let me ask you to refer towards the end of your chart there and see if you can locate these two documents in your records. I have a difficult time finding them as well.
Yes,
Okay, and are those the same documents that I'm holding?
they are.
Okay, and so in referring to that exhibit, would it be fair to say that your office sent a letter to the parents on February 26, 2019?
Yes.
Okay, and what was that letter in reference to?
It was in reference to the laboratory, abnormal state lab,
Okay, and so you're asking the parents,
to contact us. And it also says, so please give our office call concerning the lab work that must be completed for Dillon, the state, and that's talking about the state of Ohio and their laboratory system. Those people have reached out to us about this repeat newborn screening. If the test is not repeated, they will involve Children's Protective Services. I'm sorry if this has caused any inconvenience for you, but this must be repeated. Talking about the newborn screen.
okay, and then there's also a letter sent from your office on April 1st, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and what's that letter in reference to?
It says, it is very important that you call our office, and it provides the number 606-932-2079. Please ask for Anita Jacobs.
Okay, and your office was continuing to call by phone and not getting a response
Yeah,
at
I
that time?
can't tell you exactly how many times, or I don't have those
Okay.
times actually recorded.
All right. If you would explain to the members of the jury, what is the mobility of a baby approximately 2 to 3 months old?
Well, they pretty much stay where you put them. You know, they move their arms and legs. They usually start cooing and smiling around 2 months, but they're not really able to roll over consistently. They can't crawl, so they really don't have the ability to go anywhere other than just kind of where you put them.
Okay. And is a baby of that age capable of inflicting serious physical harm upon himself?
I don't see how they could.
Okay. Have you ever seen a 2 or 3 month old baby in your 30 years of practice that's caused a skull fracture to himself?
No,
Caused a rib fracture to himself?
no,
Caused an arm fracture?
no,
A leg fracture?
no.
Okay. What type of reaction in your experience of 30 years, would a baby have if they have some serious injury like that? How do they react?
Well, you talking about bone fractures, like
Yeah.
leg fracture, femur fractures?
Yes.
Yeah, they would be in a lot of pain, just like any of us would be. They feel pain just like we feel pain.
And how do
so
babies exhibit symptoms of pain?
They cry. They oftentimes they don't feed well. It's evident whenever you move them that they're in pain. I mean, when I simply examine the hips, sometimes in stretching those ligaments of the hips, I can see those babies. It hurts a little bit, and they let you know it. You know, they cry. Mostly they cry, and they'll let out screams, but they let you know when they're hurting. And fractures hurt.
Okay. What kind of symptom or sign would you expect to see if there was a fracture in your experience? In other words, how would a parent recognize the baby has a fracture? What would we be looking for?
Well, it depends on the type of fracture. If you have a fracture of, say, a long bone, say a humerus or femur or tibia, the long bones, if it's completely broken in two, what we call a transverse fracture, then usually you could see that the leg or the arm is crooked. You know, it's not normal compared to the other one. Oftentimes there's swelling, but there's always pain.
Okay.
Always
What
pain.
about skull fractures?
Skull fractures are often associated with bruising, but not always. But again, they're painful.
Would there be swelling associated possibly?
Usually, but not always, but usually, yes, there would be.
Okay. Could a skull fracture result in a brain bleed?
Yes.
Okay. If I could have just a second. Your Honor, I don't have any further questions at this time.
Mr. Stratton, you may cross-examine the witness.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hudson.
Good afternoon.
Just a few questions here. You saw Jessica Groves and Dylan and Daniel Groves in your office twice, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Either visit, what was your observations of the demeanor of the parents?
You know, there really wasn't anything that stood out in my mind.
Okay.
You know, really, the only thing I would say is one of the things that I like to do is I like to have just a word of prayer. God would bless the baby, and usually, they just, you know, the only thing I would say is when I got done praying, they just kind of looked at me a little differently than what I'm used to. That's all. But I didn't make anything out of it at all. That was the only thing I would say that was a little bit different about the visit. That's it.
So they asked the appropriate questions, answered the appropriate questions?
You don't remember specifically questions they ask.
Okay.
But, you know, parents are all different.
Right.
Some come in and they've had experience and they don't have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So I don't interpret them by not asking questions to think that, you know, there's something up or they're bad parents.
Okay.
Other parents keep me in there a long time asking a lot of
Yes.
questions.
Yes. But there was nothing strange
Nothing
about
that
this?
struck you out, yeah, other than what I told you, nothing at all.
Okay. You mentioned that typically a baby at this age, if he had some of the injuries that the prosecution had mentioned, that there would be pain involved.
Like broken bones and
Yes.
skull fractures.
Right.
Yes.
If a baby was in pain like that, the baby would scream, be crying.
Yes.
Okay. Would the baby be screaming and crying if the baby was under the influence of a drug or a substance, like a narcotic? Felix's arm was broken, but it was given or had drugs in his system. Would this baby be crying?
I would think so, you know, unless they were given like medically high doses of some kind of narcotic, like, you know, if they're in the hospital, the intensive care unit, and you have to give them medication like that to sedate them. But those kind of medications are very sedating. So if you have high enough levels to suppress, I think, the pain from a broken bone, typically you're going to have a baby that's almost obtunded or going to be very, very sleepy and not waking up and not eating and wouldn't be acting normally when you see them.
What about illegal substances? If a baby had illegal substances in his system,
Can you
could
specify a legal substance you're talking
like,
about?
let's say, methamphetamines, amphetamine.
That's not a pain killer.
Okay. So none
no,
of that?
That would not in any way alleviate pain.
Okay. When you talked about fractures to the skull, you said that there are not always bruising and swelling associated with those?
Not invariably, usually, but not always.
Not always. Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Stratton. Ms. Scott, you may cross-examine the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hudson.
Good afternoon.
Do you recall if you also treated the Groves' older child, Daniel Groves Jr., or not?
I know Daniel's been in the office, but I don't remember the last time that I saw him.
But this family has a prior relationship with you outside of Dylan Groves. They had their other child in your
They have
office.
been in the office with Daniel. Daniel was actually, I think he was in that day, according to records. I did look at that before I came in. I just don't remember that interaction. But yes, I did. It is in our records that I saw Daniel the day of the first visit of Dylan to the office.
So on February 7th of 2019,
Yes.
you would have had a visit with both Daniel Jr. and Dylan at
Yes.
the same time. Okay. So
In different rooms, though. They weren't together.
Sure. Sure. Well, one's probably 13, 14 at the time, and then you have an infant baby. So, okay, I get you. But this family had a prior relationship with you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you've had multiple times to observe them.
I just can't, I would have to go back and look.
Sure.
So I can't really comment to that as far as observing them over multiple times. I'm sorry. Again, it's just one of those things I see
No,
a lot of
that's-
patients that don't remember.
That's okay. I almost feel like you're thinking I'm going to ask you a trick question. It's not a trick question.
Right. I guess what I'm saying, but I want to answer truthfully.
Sure.
So I even going back and looking at the times that Daniel's been in the office, there wasn't a lot. I think that in our records that we've had for the past almost 3 years now, I think there was only a couple of visits. One of them was from February the 7th, and then he may have been out in our Lucasville office, which we had a different medical record, and so I didn't go back and look at that to see how many times he'd been out there and if I had seen him there.
Okay. But did anything that you did review or look at give you any suspicion when baby Dylan was brought in that these parents were not going to be compliant with what you asked them to do?
No, I thought they would be compliant with what I
Okay,
asked them to
great.
do.
And as far as you know, they went over there and attempted to perform that lab test, and there was some kind of error, and
Yeah, they went as I asked them to do,
Okay.
and they did. That first time, they did exactly what I requested them to do, and the mistake was made on the hospital's part.
the hospital made the mistake, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But it was the follow-up that we were unable to get them to go back.
Okay.
that I-
And I believe that you already stated that you didn't see anything odd or out of the way other than at the conclusion of this one prayer, you thought they kind of looked at you funny.
Yeah, that's the only thing, and I wouldn't even bring that up except I was asked, and I swore
Okay.
that I would tell everything.
But they know that that's kind of a practice that you have with your patients, that sometimes you say prayers with your patients at the
Yes,
end.
it is.
Okay, so that wasn't unusual.
No, and they didn't object because I asked them beforehand. I'll just break
Sure,
out into a prayer.
sure. I mean, yeah, and that's a practice in your doctor's office, but they didn't. It was just a look.
Yeah, that's all.
And,
That's
and,
all.
and they didn't say anything out of the way.
No, they did not.
They didn't negate anything you said,
It
or
might have been just surprise. I don't know.
Okay.
But it wasn't anything
okay,
mean or unkind.
okay. And I know that you were addressed or asked to address the issue of a potential skull fracture. Do you know how long it takes for a small skull fracture to heal or show signs of healing?
I think you should be able to see some signs of healing within a couple of weeks on a re-X-ray. I think.
Okay. And the pain and the bruising that you talked about with broken bones or skull fracture, would that subside over somewhat of a period of time once that healing began?
Yeah, it takes. Of course, younger babies heal quicker. Typically, you think about 6 weeks for like a long bone fracture, humerus or radius ulmus, femur, tibia to heal.
Right.
So you would expect there would be some tenderness or some abnormality that you could see, depending on the severity of the fracture.
Right.
If it was completely broken in two, you should be able to see that, a swelling, even weeks later.
But if we're talking about a skull fracture
Uh-huh.
that is
not very long in length, maybe less than 2 inches.
Yeah, it
That
depends.
was
If
not
it's
like a crushing,
Yeah,
not a
if
crushing
it's a
injury.
non-depressed skull fracture, a simple skull fracture, you know.
I want to call it a clean break, but maybe associated, like, I don't even, like,
As far as, so you're saying, what are you asking me? I'm sorry.
like if the length of it, it's not a crushing skull injury.
Uh-huh.
There's not an indentation of the bone.
Not a depressed
It's
skull fracture.
merely a line
Uh-huh.
fracture. And obviously, I'm not a medical person, so I'm not sure what the terminology is. How long would that take to start showing signs of healing, if you are aware?
Well, I guess I can't say for sure. To show signs, you mean like when you say signs of healing, you're saying
That the bone
you
was
could
starting to
actually
knit back together.
that you could X-ray and see that there was healing?
That's correct.
Okay. You might see some signs on X-ray in just a few days,
Okay.
but it may take long. But
Right.
I'm really not. I don't feel like I know enough about that to comment definitively.
Okay.
I mean, I know what I've read, and usually within a few days, but
Okay.
that's not something I follow.
Okay. And then any bruising or possible swelling that would be associated with that, would that go away after a few days as well?
It depends, again, on how much tissue damage there was at the time of the skull fracture. Sometimes there can be skull fractures, babies can fall out of grocery carts and not even have a bruise. So to say that the bruising will be gone in a few days is kind of a difficult question to answer. But I think if there's a lot of trauma to the subcutaneous tissue, then you could be a parent there for 2 weeks later. You could still see bruising, because bruising is simply blood that from the trauma that gets underneath the skin, and as that blood is reabsorbed, it goes from being kind of a dark purple to a reddish to a kind of a brown, a yellow, and then it is gone.
So let's use your example that you just gave, that if a baby fell out of a shopping cart and caused a skull fracture, that would not be like a crushing injury, correct?
It could be. It depends
But-
on how depends on how far they
Depends
fell
on how the
and
baby
what they
lands.
landed on.
Right.
There have been some really serious injuries, although rare. Children who've fallen from
Right.
that height.
Right. But you use the example that sometimes you may not even see anything associated
Sometimes there
with
may
that.
not be much
Right.
of an external evidence of a skull fracture, other than an X-ray, which is of course not external.
Right.
But as far as just examination with your eyes and hands, you may not be able to detect it.
But that's what I was getting at. So there may be some incidents that would result in a skull fracture that may show no outward signs, such as bruising or swelling.
That can happen.
Thank you. That's what I needed to know. Thank you so much, Dr. Hudson. I appreciate it. Your Honor, thank you.
May redirect.
To Sophia.
Doctor, you were asked about suspicion that they would not be compliant. And you said in February, early February, you had no suspicion that they would not be compliant. And in fact, on February 7th, they did comply with your requests.
Yes.
Okay. But thereafter, they did not. February 21st, they did not.
No.
And then
I
they-
did explain to them, from my perspective, why this was so important.
Okay. And then they failed to show up for future appointments and failed to have contact with your office after that.
Yes.
Okay. You were asked about whether a baby would exhibit signs of pain if he were on illicit substances or prescription drugs, but the topic came up of methamphetamine, and you said that's not a pain medicine.
Yes.
What does methamphetamine do to the body?
What does methamphetamine do?
Yeah, what effect does it have on an infant's body if a baby's exposed to a methamphetamine?
Well, you would expect the baby is, amphetamines are stimulants. Okay, so you would expect a baby to be crying a lot. What do babies do? You get overstimulated. You expect them to cry a lot. You expect them to not sleep. If they were under, influence of methamphetamine, maybe not to eat well, maybe to vomit, but sleeping and not experiencing pain, I wouldn't think would be a side effect.
As a pediatrician, do you chart the circumference of a baby's skull or head?
Yes.
If you would tell the members of the jury what the circumference of that baby's head was on February 21st.
.6 centimeters.
Okay. And I'm a lawyer for a reason. How many inches would that be?
Well, divide that by 2.54. So you're talking roughly around the, maybe 14
I
inches.
apologize, doctor.
That's okay.
But if you know.
Well, I'd have to, so you did 36.8 divided by 2.54. Someone want to do that real quick? I can't do that on my head.
The judge has a calculator for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, appreciate that. Coming on. There we go. 14.5 inches.
Okay, and how is that measured, if you would explain that to the jury?
We have a tape measure that fits around the head, and so you wrap it around and you just read the number.
Okay. So if baby Dylan had a 2-inch skull fracture, that wouldn't be considered a little skull fracture? If his whole head is 14 inches around?
No, I would think 2 inches. 2 inches is a significant skull fracture. Yeah.
It's a 1-inch skull
Any
fracture.
fracture is significant. Absolutely.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Is this witness excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
You're free to go. Thank you. So you can leave the record.